We just received our 1320 cold air intake for 2015 to 2019 Subaru WRX that we are about to install on our 2017 Subaru WRX.
So this is how it came packaged. Seems like they did a pretty decent job packaging it. There's a like a packing list on the outside of the box. I guess we'll start out with the instructions that they include, which is nice. It's not very often you get instructions for an intake. So there's that. Stickers so everyone knows you're a badass. I was pretty surprised with how nice the finish is on it. This is the air box for it. Seems like they did a pretty good job with the finish. And here's the pipe. And again, seems like the finish was pretty good. Like they masked it pretty good, and the machining looks good on the piping. So I'd say I'm happy with that. And of course, it comes with all necessary hardware for install. So you got your harness extension and your little trim pieces and hardware, the 2 clamps you need. These are your mounting brackets. I assume this is for the pipe up top. And then this one, what I'm guessing, should go on the box like so. So, seems like they got a pretty decent mounting system for it. And then you got the coupler, which I'm assuming goes to the turbo. And then the filter seems fairly nice. Nothing too special about it, but should be fine. But yeah, so we'll be installing it on the Subaru and we'll go from there. So the first thing you need to do is remove the factory air duct. That is held on by these 2 clips. Once you pop the clips out, then it just pulls up pretty much. So now that we have the air duct removed, we are going to need to remove these 2 bolts here. We're going to need to unplug this MAF sensor harness, and there's another 10 mil down here. So you want to make sure your harness is unplugged. And you should be able to pull this front section out. You could probably just leave the filter in there. It comes out pretty easy. Next, you're gonna remove this 10 millimeter bolt that holds the intake tube to a bracket. So now there's two ways you could do it. You could remove this clamp here and have it come out in two pieces. And I think that's what we're gonna do. So once you get that good and loose, then in a perfect world you should be able to pull it out. Like sometimes they get a little stuck. You can get something to pry on the rubber to break it loose from the plastic. It should help. So now with that loose, you should be able to pull the air box with the piping out. For the next section, you can probably get away without lifting the car and removing the skid plate on the bottom, but I'm pretty sure they recommend to do it that way. I guess we will get the car up in the air and then we'll come back. So for removing the underbelly, you're gonna have two 12mm bolts, and I think the instructions said 13 plastic clips to hold the underpan on. So we'll go ahead and start with the two 12mm bolts. So you got these two bolts here. And then now I need to go all the way around and remove all these clips. How you release the clips is you get the flathead in it and you pull it, pretty much pull it down. The way it clips is once it's in there, this spreads it to make it hold on to the car. So you want to pop all those things out, which might take a little bit of time. But you will notice as you remove them, things will come loose. You're also gonna have clips. Oh, great. You're also gonna have clips all up the side. Pretty much anything that is holding this underbelly to the car, you're gonna have to remove. So there's two here, and then it goes all the way up into the fender well even. Once you get those removed, then you should be able to drop it down and expose the area that you need to work on. As far as lifting the vehicle, there's not really a whole lot of good lift points. Don't let this plate fool you. I don't think it's a solid lift point. I mean, maybe it could be, but it's pretty thin metal, so I'd hate to see someone try to lift their car from here and dent it in and damage stuff. We lifted from the factory lift points over here on the jack, and then we put the jack stand on the frame. Again, there's not really a whole lot of amazing places to lift this car, but that's how we did it there. You always want to use a jack stand. Pretty much when you get under a vehicle, anything that can add a little bit of safety is good. But yeah, we'll remove the rest of these clips and come back to you. So, I'm going to be honest, that was not my favorite part. There's a lot of clips. I guess there was one up here. You'll just kind of see them everywhere. I know there's probably better install instructions online. But yeah, so now that I've got this cover off, you can now see the turbo. So it looks like the turbo. So this is where the lower part of the intake comes off. I have heard of people installing these intakes without removing this, but this is the proper way to do it, and we're making a video about it, so that's what we're doing. There we go. So we'll pull this intake boot off. Get that out of the way. And this is where the intake is going to connect. So we are going to need our intake. Pretty much the instructions say to go ahead and connect your intake boot. And you want your clamps in place. Let's see, looks like these are the right size. So you probably want two of the same size, and they all might be the same size. Yeah, they're all the same size. So you're going to want to put your two clamps on. Oh, you know what? That's the wrong side, I think. I believe it goes like this. I'm kind of winging it, so bear with me. No, it looks like these clamps are too small. Looks like the clamps are just barely big enough to fit on there. I do like to try to put them the same way if I can when I do stuff like this. I believe that's how it's going to go on. So it's probably going to go best putting it on from the bottom. You know what? Something I didn't realize is getting this out of the way is probably a good idea. Well, it doesn't say anything about that bolt though. Maybe Maybe putting it in from the top might be better. Maybe not putting the clamp on is a better idea right off the bat. But you can see that's about how it's gonna sit. So now that we got the pipe in place, we'll go back under the vehicle and put our coupler on. Okay. Yeah, that should be good. So, I guess as gentle as you can, try not to scratch stuff, which I'm probably doing. So, like the instructions say, you want to leave it kind of loose, but just have it in place so you can figure out how everything's going to line up and mount up, and then you can come back and tighten them. So we'll just give it a little bit. And I always try to make it so it's easy to access. And a pointer, I broke probably about 5 of these clips, so might not be a bad idea to have some spare ones on hand for when you reinstall. There's one right there, and one right here. So, yeah, I guess we will come back when we are installing the airbox. So I probably should have mentioned a little bit sooner, the mass airflow sensor needs to be removed and installed on the intake pipe. Might have been better to do that before you put it in the car, but like I said, I'm kind of winging this. So it's 2 Phillips screws to remove it. And the kit does supply 2 Allen head screws to install it on their pipe. I always like to put the screws back in the factory box just so you don't lose track of them in case you ever want to put it back to stock. So the kit comes with these 2 Allen heads, and they do supply the tools. So we will go ahead and put them, or put the sensor on inside the car. I was a little worried that I might put it in backwards or something. But the way it's set up, you can't really put it in backwards. Pretty sure this intake is fairly similar to the Cobb, but I didn't really want to spend $400 on an intake, so we found this one. Then we're gonna go back down to adding the trim to this bracket. There's various trims and stuff in the kit. And they say to use scissors to trim it where you need it. I figure the tighter you can make it, the better, because that's going to wrap around the piping. You got this bracket. So we will go ahead and install the brackets to the kit. I'm assuming these 10 millimeters will be for the bracket. Okay. So 1, 2, 3. Gonna be your supplied washers and your lock washers. All right. So you typically want to do your lock washer and then your bigger washer. So we'll come back up here. We are going to have factory mounting point. So there's going to be one of your supplied bolts into the frame right here. It's a threaded hole. So that'll be for one part. We'll leave it loose for the moment. And the next bracket holds the intake tube on. That's what the trim was for, to kind of pad it so it's not rattling around. Well, it seems pretty loose, but I guess we'll see. Yeah, so this bracket should hold it in place there. We have the bolts that we removed earlier, 2 10 millimeters. We can pretty much put them back in their spot, but with our new bracket system. So then we'll go ahead and lock these bolts down. Not too tight, not too loose. See how sturdy it is. We have our harness extension. You can go ahead and plug it into the sensor, the mass airflow sensor. You want to make sure it clicks and that it's on there good so it doesn't come loose on you and give you a check engine light. As far as routing the harness, you can route it however you want. And then on the other side, of course, you want to make sure you hear a click. I don't hear the click. I think that was it. Because, again, you really don't want it to come loose and create issues for you. So, we know it's tight. Now, we'll come back down to the air box with the trim that goes on that. Let's see. The instructions pretty much state just to put the trim on, but it doesn't go into crazy detail as to what goes where. So you're going to want to install the trim on the air box. I'm assuming this long piece goes here because it's going to block the air from coming in. Because this is going to be the front side of the box where the air duct comes in. But you pretty much want this trim installed anywhere where it's going to come into contact with the vehicle, except for here, because that's where the bracket goes. So we'll go ahead and install this piece, and looks like this piece. Well, we'll come back to you once we figure out how exactly this goes on. All right, so we're back. Did a little bit of figuring out. I ended up putting one of the, one of the Allen head screws in this bracket instead of that 10mm because there is 3 10mm bolts and 3 mounting points for the airbox, so this makes sense. Now that we have all the brackets on and everything, we want to install the cone filter. And we can go ahead and lock that down. So that should be good there. As far as the trim on the airbox, it does not specify how exactly to put it on. I just kind of did what makes sense. The thinner side around here for padding where it's going to be coming in contact with stuff. And then this is a little bit more open in these areas, so the ones with the flaps on them just make sense for blocking air. But yeah, we will go ahead and put the air box over the cone filter now. I am using the 10mm bolts supplied. There is a lock washer, a big washer, and it looks like these little plastic ones are probably just for padding so it doesn't rattle. So if you are using an impact of any kind, you you want to make sure this thread's in before you just start hammering it down and stripping stuff. So I would recommend, it's almost good to put it in mostly by hand, just so you don't run into those issues. Yeah, so I don't bore you. You're gonna have your 10 mil, 10 mil. Then down here, there's one more bracket that you're gonna need to bolt down. And we'll come back to you after that. All right, so now that we are back, this was a little bit of a tight fit. I mean, it fits good and snug, but it was I had to wrestle it a little bit. The holes up top here are like the exact size for the bolts to go through. I drilled them out a little bit just to make things easier, and it made a big difference on getting it to thread in. And then this one down here, of course, a little bit of wrestling. It was all right. I forgot about this piece, so I just put it back in. Now that this is all locked in, you can reinstall the factory air duct. That little rubber stuff should seal it off pretty good. And then, you got your clips, of course. I lost the other clip, so I'm using this guy. So, now you got your air duct running to your box that should be fairly sealed. And as far as under the car, once the filter was installed, it says to go ahead and lock down your clamps for your for down here. I got everything tight. Seems like everything's fairly aligned. Doesn't sound like I'm going to have any rattles. I guess now we can install our under tray. This intake does require a tune. So we have the cob, and we're going to run the shelf tune for the intake, or the stage 1 shelf tune with the intake for the time being until we get everything else situated. But yeah, so we just we didn't really find any content on this intake in particular, so we figured since we're trying it out, we will go ahead and try to fill you guys in on fitting it, and we'll go ahead and do a follow-up video on how it runs and how it sounds. Thanks for watching.